He has 20 minutes. Dr. Victor Hale said it without raising his voice, and somehow that made the words colder. Outside the Kong estate, rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows hard enough to blur the lights of Chicago into pale streaks of gold and white. But inside the private medical suite, everything was sterile, bright, controlled. Stainless steel, white sheets, glass cabinets, machines counting down a life in green numbers. Ethan Kong lay motionless beneath the thin hospital blanket, his face drained of the quiet authority that had made powerful men lower their voices when he entered a room. At 38, the Korean Mafia boss had survived betrayals, federal investigations, and enemies who had spent years waiting for him to make one mistake. None of them had brought him this close to death. Dr. Hale pulled off his gloves and dropped them into a metal tray. The soft snap of latex sounded strangely final. "Prepare his people," he said. "There's nothing else medicine can do." Marcus Reed stood near the bed, 6 feet 2 inches of disciplined silence in a black suit, staring at Ethan as if refusing to understand the sentence. 3 specialists avoided his eyes. No one noticed the woman kneeling near the far wall. Aaliyah Carter pressed a gray cloth against a thin streak of spilled antiseptic on the marble floor. Her dark hands moved slowly, quietly, the way they always did. For 11 months, she had cleaned the Kong estate without asking questions. She knew which hallways emptied when private meetings began. She knew which doors remained locked. She knew invisibility was part of her job. Tonight, invisibility should have protected her. But Aaliyah wasn't watching the doctors. She was watching Ethan's jaw. Tighten, release, tighten, release. Her hand stopped moving. Once every 7 seconds. Her breath caught. 17 years disappeared in an instant, and she was 19 again, standing in her grandmother Evelyn's cramped kitchen in Georgia, watching a dying man breathe beneath a yellow lamp while rain tapped against an old screen door. The doctors had sent that man home too. Evelyn had leaned close to Aaliyah and whispered words she had never forgotten. Machines count numbers. You watch the person. Aaliyah looked toward the monitor beside Ethan's bed. The numbers were failing. His oxygen level slipped lower. His pulse weakened. Yet his jaw tightened again. 7 seconds. Release. 7 seconds. Tighten. Increase the sedative, Dr. Hale ordered. A nurse reached for a syringe. Something cold moved through Aaliyah's chest. She stared at Ethan's fingers. Still. His eyelids. Still. Then his throat shifted almost imperceptibly. Aaliyah rose. The cleaning cloth slipped from her hand and landed on the marble with a wet sound. No one turned. She took 1 step forward. Then another. Marcus noticed her first. His eyes hardened. "Ms. Carter, leave the room." Aaliyah barely heard him. The nurse moved toward Ethan's foreline. 5 feet away. 4. 3. Aaliyah's heart struck against her ribs. She had promised herself she would never do this again. Never watch a body for hidden signs. Never trust the lessons Evelyn had placed in her hands. Never carry the weight of another person's final breath. But Ethan's jaw tightened once more. 7 seconds. Aaliyah lifted her eyes. He's not dying. The nurse froze. Dr. Hale slowly turned. Marcus said nothing. Every machine continued to hum, but the room itself seemed to lose its breath. Aaliyah stood in her plain black maid's uniform beneath the white medical lights, her hands trembling at her sides, while 4 doctors stared at her as if the furniture had suddenly spoken. Dr. Hale's expression changed first. Not surprise. Offense. "What did you say?" Aaliyah looked past him at Ethan Kong. Her eyes steady now. "I said he's not dying." Dr. Hale gave a small, humorless laugh. The nurse lowered the syringe by half an inch. Aaliyah saw it. Saw the clear liquid waiting behind the needle. Saw Ethan's jaw tighten again. And suddenly she understood why the rhythm felt familiar. Her blood went cold. "Don't give him that." This time, nobody laughed. Dr. Hale stopped smiling. Dr. Hale stared at Aaliyah for 3 long seconds, then turned toward the other physicians with a faint smile that carried no warmth. Apparently, housekeeping has joined the medical team. One of the specialists looked down. Another cleared his throat. Aaliyah felt heat rise into her face, but she did not move. She had spent most of her life learning how to survive rooms where people decided what she knew before she opened her mouth. This room was no different. Marble beneath her worn shoes. White coats around $1 million bed. Her black uniform marked her place more clearly than any sign ever could. "Miss Carter," Marcus said, his voice controlled. You were told to leave. I know. Then leave. The nurse lifted the syringe again. Aaliyah watched Ethan's throat tighten. Release. His jaw followed 7 seconds later. Her pulse quickened. If she gives him that medication, his condition will get worse. Dr. Hale's head turned sharply. Based on what? Aaliyah swallowed. The answer lived inside memories she had spent 10 years trying to bury. Based on what I can see. A quiet laugh escaped one physician. Dr. Hale stepped closer, stopping several feet from her. I attended Johns Hopkins. I have practiced critical care medicine for 27 years. The 3 people standing behind me have more than 60 years of combined experience. And you clean this house. There it was. Not a question. A verdict. Aaliyah looked at him. Yes, sir. Where did you attend medical school? I did not. Where did you complete your residency? I did not. His smile returned. Then this conversation is over. He nodded toward the nurse. Proceed. The nurse reached for Ethan's intravenous line. Aaliyah's hands began to shake. 17 years ago, she had watched another room full of educated people dismiss Evelyn Carter with the same expression. Patient. Amused. Certain. She remembered her grandmother standing beneath fluorescent lights, speaking softly while no one listened. Aaliyah had promised herself she would never become that woman. Never beg powerful people to hear her. Never carry knowledge that only made people laugh. The needle moved closer. His jaw tightens every 7 seconds, Aaliyah said. The nurse stopped. Dr. Hale did not turn. His swallowing reflex changes immediately afterward. His skin is cold, but he is still sweating near the hairline. His breathing becomes shallower whenever the medication enters the line. Silence spread slowly across the room. One specialist glanced at Ethan, then at the monitor. Coincidence, Dr. Hale said. Then wait 7 seconds. Aaliyah's voice surprised even her. Marcus looked at his watch. Nobody spoke. 1 second. 2. 3. Rain struck the windows. 4. 5. 6. Ethan's jaw tightened. 7. The specialist nearest the monitor leaned forward. Aaliyah saw uncertainty enter his face. Dr. Hale saw it too. Enough. His voice had changed. The cold confidence was still there, but something sharper now lived beneath it. Remove her. Marcus gestured to 2 security men waiting outside the medical suite. They entered quietly. Aaliyah stepped backward before either man reached her. Please. The word came out smaller than she intended. She hated that. You have to listen. Dr. Hale turned away. I have a dying patient. No. Aaliyah's eyes moved to Ethan. You have a patient trying to tell you something. Marcus's expression tightened. Miss Carter. The security men stood beside her. Neither touched her harshly, but their meaning was clear. She walked because she understood there was no choice. The white medical room disappeared behind closing doors. Aaliyah stood in the marble hallway, breathing too quickly, staring at her trembling hands. Inside, voices became muffled. Then she heard Dr. Hale clearly. Administer the dose. Aaliyah closed her eyes. The monitor sounded once. Twice. Then a long alarm tore through the hallway. Every security man turned toward the door. Aaliyah did not. She was already running back. The alarm followed Aaliyah through the doorway, sharp and relentless, but before she reached Ethan's bed, a memory caught her by the wrist. Georgia, 17 years earlier. A kitchen barely 12 feet wide, warm with summer air and the smell of boiled peppermint leaves. A yellow lamp above a scarred wooden table. Evelyn Carter standing beside a frightened man whose breathing had turned shallow after the county hospital sent him home. Aaliyah had been 19, barefoot on cool linoleum, watching her grandmother ignore the clock and study. The man instead. Do not chase the noise, Evelyn had whispered. Find the rhythm underneath it. Evelyn had never called herself a healer. She had spent 23 years as a nursing aide, changing sheets, cleaning rooms, and noticing what busy people missed. She knew the limits of her role, and she respected them. But she also believed observation was a form of care. Machines count numbers, she told Aaliyah. You watch the person. That night, Evelyn noticed a pattern in the man's breathing and insisted his family call emergency services again and describe the changes precisely. The second hospital listened. The man survived. Aaliyah remembered believing her grandmother could see things hidden from everyone else. Then, 2 years later, her mother became sick. Aaliyah watched the same lessons, the same careful attention, the same desperate hope collide with a body that could not be saved. She had tried to help. She had watched every breath, counted every pause, trusted every instinct. Her mother still died before sunrise. Grief had rewritten the memory until Aaliyah no longer remembered what the doctors said. She remembered only her own hands. Useless, trembling, too late. After the funeral, she packed Evelyn's notebooks into a cardboard box and pushed them beneath her bed. She stopped asking questions, stopped studying, stopped believing that noticing something meant she had the right to speak. Years passed. Georgia became Illinois. Small apartments became rented rooms. Nursing dreams became cleaning shifts because cleaning was simple. A dirty floor never asked her to save it. A marble counter never stopped breathing while she watched. Then Ethan Kong entered her life without ever truly noticing her. For 11 months, Aaliyah polished the dark wood outside his study, carried fresh linens through silent hallways, and learned the sounds of a house built around one man's authority. Ethan rarely spoke to her. A nod in the morning, a quiet thank you when she moved his coffee. Nothing more. Yet she noticed him because Evelyn had trained her to notice everyone. Ethan rubbed his left wrist when exhausted. He skipped breakfast after sleepless nights. He drank black coffee but stopped after 2 cups. He breathed slowly when angry, as if counting his own restraint. And 3 days before he collapsed, Aaliyah had seen something else. A tremor in his fingers. Sweat near his hairline despite the cold dining room. A brief tightening of his jaw. 7 seconds. She had almost spoken then. Almost. Increased the dose. Dr. Hale's voice dragged her back into the present. Aaliyah crossed the medical suite as the nurse stepped away from the bed. Marcus turned toward her. Stop. Aaliyah stopped. Her chest rose and fell. The monitor continued its urgent cry. Dr. Hale reached toward the medication tray. Aaliyah looked at Ethan's pale face, then at her own hands. For 10 years, she had blamed those hands for failing one person she loved. She had built an entire life around never asking them to carry that weight again. Her grandmother's voice returned, quiet as Georgia rain. Watch the person. Aaliyah opened her eyes. No more. Dr. Hale stared at her. Excuse me. She stepped forward. Her hands were still trembling, but her voice was not. I said no more. Marcus moved between her and the bed. Aaliyah looked directly at him. If you trust that man enough to protect his life, then give me 60 seconds to explain why they are losing it. Marcus froze. Behind him, the monitor changed pitch. Dr. Hale reached for the medication. Aaliyah saw his hand close around it. She saw Ethan's throat shift. 7 seconds. The old fear inside her broke open. This time, she did not step back. Marcus did not move for 3 seconds. In Ethan Kang's world, 3 seconds could separate loyalty from betrayal, but tonight they separated obedience from doubt. 60 seconds, Marcus said. Dr. Hale turned sharply. You cannot be serious. 58 now. Aaliyah moved to the bed. She did not touch Ethan at first. She watched. His jaw tightened. His throat shifted. A shallow breath followed. Then the monitor changed. There, she said. The pattern starts before the numbers fall. One specialist stepped closer. Dr. Hale blocked him with a look. She is guessing. Aaliyah pointed toward Ethan's neck. His swallowing changes first. Then, his jaw. Then his breathing. Every time the medication enters his line, the cycle becomes stronger. The nurse looked at the chart in her hands. Her face changed. The last 3 drops happened within minutes of administration. Dr. Hale's voice hardened. Correlation is not causation. Then stop treating the chart and watch the man. The words landed harder than Aaliyah intended. Nobody spoke. She reached for the blanket and folded it lower, exposing Ethan's forearms without disturbing the medical lines. His skin was cold, but moisture gathered near his wrists. Aaliyah remembered Evelyn's kitchen. Breath, rhythm, skin, response. Never magic. Never miracles. Attention. I need a warm towel, Aaliyah said. The nurse hesitated. Marcus nodded once. A towel arrived seconds later. Aaliyah placed it carefully around Ethan's hands and washed his fingers. What exactly are you doing? Marcus asked, listening to what his body does next. Dr. Hale laughed quietly. With a towel? No. With time. Aaliyah looked at the wall clock. Do not give him anything for 60 seconds. Dr. Hale stepped forward. You are interfering with a critical treatment plan. Your treatment plan gave him 20 minutes. Silence. Even Marcus looked at the doctor then. Aaliyah turned back to Ethan. She adjusted his position slightly, so his head rested more naturally, then asked the nurse to confirm that his airway remained clear. She did nothing dramatic, nothing mystical. She reduced stimulation, asked for the overhead lights to be dimmed, and watched the rhythm Evelyn had taught her to find beneath the noise. 10 seconds. Ethan's jaw tightened. 20. His throat shifted. 30. The shallow breaths remained, but the gaps between them changed. The specialist nearest the monitor leaned in. His oxygen level is holding. Dr. Hale stared at the screen. Temporary. 40 seconds. Aaliyah pressed 2 fingers lightly against Ethan's wrist, not pretending to be a physician, only feeling the rhythm she had been watching with her eyes. Uneven, then steadier. 50 seconds. The nurse whispered, his pulse is improving. Dr. Hale reached for the medication again. Enough of this. Aaliyah moved her hand between him and the tray. She did not touch him. She simply stood there. A black maid in a plain uniform, 5 feet 6 inches tall, surrounded by men whose titles could erase her voice with a sentence. Please, she said. Look at him. Dr. Hale's eyes narrowed. Move. Look at him. Marcus stepped closer, but Aaliyah remained still. Ethan's fingers moved beneath the warm towel. Once. Small enough that everyone could have missed it. Aaliyah did not. There. The nurse gasped. One specialist bent toward Ethan. His eyes widened. He responded. Dr. Hale stopped. The medication remained in his hand. Aaliyah felt her knees weaken, but she held herself upright. The monitor changed again. A slower rhythm. A stronger one. Ethan's chest rose. The breath that entered him was deeper than any he had taken since Aaliyah walked into the room. It filled his lungs, paused, then left slowly. No one laughed now. Dr. Hale looked from Ethan to Aaliyah, and for the first time that night, uncertainty crossed his face. Aaliyah lowered her trembling hand. You treated the chart, she whispered. Nobody watched the man. Ethan drew another deep breath. The room went silent. For several seconds, no one moved. The monitor no longer screamed. It counted. 1 beat. Another. Then another. Aaliyah stood beside Ethan's bed with the warm towel still wrapped around his hands, afraid that even breathing too loudly might disturb the fragile rhythm returning to the room. The nurse checked the screen twice. His oxygen level is rising. The specialist beside her leaned over the chart. Pulse is stabilizing. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Relief softened his face, but Dr. Hale remained perfectly still. Then his expression changed. Not gratitude. Calculation. Step away from the patient, he said. Aaliyah looked at him. He needs to be watched. Step away. His voice was quieter now. Colder. Marcus opened his eyes. Doctor. This woman interrupted an active medical procedure without authorization. She handled a critically ill patient. She obstructed treatment. Aaliyah stared at him. I asked you to wait 60 seconds. You are a housekeeper. And he is breathing. The nurse looked down quickly. Dr. Hale placed the medication back on the tray with careful precision. If Mr. Kong suffers another decline, every second of your interference becomes part of the record. Aaliyah felt the words settle over her like ice. She had expected disbelief. She had expected laughter. She had not expected the room to turn her success into an accusation. Marcus moved closer to Ethan's bed. She may have saved his life. Or delayed a fatal collapse, Dr. Hale replied. We do not know yet. Aaliyah looked at Ethan. His face remained pale, but his breathing was deeper. More even. She wanted that to be enough. 10 years ago, she had wanted her mother's next breath to be enough too. Hope could be cruel when you gave it a name too early. Marcus, Dr. Hale said. For Mr. Kang's protection, she needs to be removed from this medical suite until we understand what happened. Marcus did not answer immediately. His loyalty was visible in the tension across his shoulders. Ethan had trusted him with businesses, secrets, and decisions no outsider would ever understand. But Ethan was unconscious. Dr. Hale had credentials. Aaliyah had a cleaning cloth lying on the floor. The difference mattered in rooms built on hierarchy. Marcus finally looked at her. Aaliyah, come with me. Her chest tightened. You saw his hand move. I did. You heard the nurse. I did. Then why? Marcus lowered his voice. Because until Ethan wakes up, I have to keep this house under control. Aaliyah almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because Evelyn had once told her that control was the word frightened people used when listening became uncomfortable. She removed the towel from Ethan's hands and folded it neatly beside the bed. "Keep watching his jaw," she told the nurse. "Please." The nurse met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. Aaliyah walked out without resisting. 2 security men followed Marcus through the marble hallway and down a private staircase. The estate grew colder below the first floor. The warm wood and gold light disappeared, replaced by gray walls and quiet storage rooms. Marcus opened a small furnished room near the security offices. "You will stay here." "Am I being detained?" He paused. "You are being kept available." "That sounds expensive for detained." For the first time that night, something almost human crossed Marcus's face. Then it vanished. "I am going to find out who you are." Aaliyah stepped inside. "I have worked here 11 months. That tells me what you do, not who you are." The door closed. Aaliyah sat on the edge of a narrow chair and stared at her hands. Upstairs, Marcus entered the security office and typed her full name into a private database. Aaliyah Denise Carter. Born in Georgia. Former nursing student. Education incomplete. Mother deceased. Grandmother, Evelyn Carter, former nursing aide. Marcus opened an archived hospital record from 10 years earlier. He read the attending physician's name once. Then again. Dr. Victor Hale. Upstairs, Dr. Hale stood alone beside Ethan's bed, staring at the stable monitor. His face had lost all color. Down below, Aaliyah heard footsteps stop outside her door. The lock turned. Dr. Hale entered and closed it behind him. "You should have stayed a maid," he said. Dr. Hale remained near the door, one hand resting against the polished handle as if he feared someone might enter before he finished speaking. Aaliyah studied his face. Upstairs, he had looked offended. Here, beneath the flat fluorescent light, he looked afraid. "You knew my grandmother," she said. Hale's eyes narrowed. Marcus works quickly. "You knew Evelyn Carter." "I knew of her." Aaliyah stood. "That is not what I asked." The old doctor looked at her for a long moment, and something in his practiced confidence began to crack. "Your grandmother worked at St. Matthew's Hospital when I was a young attending physician. She was an aide. Nothing more. Nothing more." The word struck Aaliyah with the same quiet cruelty as "you are a housekeeper." Hale continued. "Evelyn had a habit of questioning decisions above her position. She noticed things. She created problems." Rain murmured through pipes somewhere behind the walls. Aaliyah remembered Evelyn's notebooks. Pages filled with dates, breathing patterns, temperatures, names. Not diagnoses. Observations. Hundreds of details written by a woman who understood that poor patients were often remembered only after something went wrong. "What happened to my mother?" Aaliyah asked. Hale looked away. That small movement answered more than words could. "What happened?" she repeated. "Your mother was critically ill." "I know that. Her condition was complicated." "I know that too." Aaliyah stepped closer, leaving several feet between them. "Why was my grandmother removed from the hospital?" Hale's jaw tightened. She accused members of the medical staff of ignoring adverse reactions in patients receiving a particular treatment protocol. Aaliyah stopped breathing for a moment. 7 seconds. Jaw, throat, breath. The same kind of reaction Ethan had tonight. Hale said nothing. The silence became heavy. "You remembered it," Aaliyah whispered. "When I described the pattern, you remembered. There was never sufficient evidence." "That is not a denial." Hale's face hardened. "You have no idea how medicine works. Patterns are not proof. Instinct is not evidence. Then why are you down here instead of beside your patient?" He froze. Aaliyah felt Evelyn standing with her again, not as a ghost, but as a memory finally placed in the correct light. For 10 years, Aaliyah had believed her mother's death proved she should never trust what she noticed. She had carried shame that was never fully hers to carry. "My grandmother told you," she said. "She told all of you what she saw." Hale lowered his voice. Evelyn filed a complaint. The hospital reviewed it, and it was dismissed. Then she lost her job. Hale looked toward the door. She violated procedure. Aaliyah's eyes burned, but her voice remained steady. "No, she embarrassed people with titles." Hale opened his mouth, then stopped. For the first time, Aaliyah saw him without the white coat, without the specialists, without the polished language. Just a man who had spent years protecting an old decision because admitting the truth would force him to remember the people beneath it. "You should have stayed quiet tonight," he said. "Why?" "Because people like Ethan Kong do not survive by trusting uncertainty. He survived because someone finally questioned certainty." Hale's face went still. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Fast. Controlled. The door opened before Hale could reach it. Marcus stood there holding a tablet. His eyes moved from Hale to Aaliyah. Doctor, upstairs. Now. Hale straightened. What happened? Marcus did not answer him. He looked directly at Aaliyah. Mr. Kong is awake. Her knees nearly weakened. Hale's face lost its remaining color. Marcus stepped aside. He spoke 3 words. Aaliyah pressed one trembling hand against the chair. What did he say? Marcus's expression changed. The smallest fracture in a man trained never to reveal emotion. Where is she? Hale stared at him. Marcus never looked away from Aaliyah. Upstairs, 3 floors above them. Ethan Kong opened his eyes again and waited for an answer. Marcus did not take Aaliyah upstairs immediately. Instead, he led her into the security office, where 6 monitors covered one wall with silent images of the Kong estate. Ethan's medical suite filled the largest screen. He was awake, barely. His eyes remained half open, his face pale against the white pillow, but the man who had been given 20 minutes was breathing without the terrible rhythm Aaliyah had recognized. Dr. Hale entered the medical suite on another monitor. Ethan watched him approach. Even without sound, Aaliyah saw the question in Ethan's eyes. Marcus touched the screen and opened the recorded footage from 40 minutes earlier. He asked what happened. Marcus said, I decided he should see it. Aaliyah's stomach tightened. The recording showed her kneeling near the marble wall with a cleaning cloth in her hand. Small, distant, invisible. Then Dr. Hale removed his gloves. The physician spoke. The nurse lifted the syringe. Aaliyah watched herself stand. Turn it off, she whispered. Marcus did not. The footage continued. She saw the doctors laugh. Saw herself describe Ethan's jaw tightening. Saw the security men escort her into the hallway. Then the alarm. Then her return. Marcus slowed the recording when Aaliyah stepped between Dr. Hale and the medication tray. On the screen, her hands were visibly shaking. You were afraid, Marcus said. Of course I was. But you came back. Aaliyah looked at him. He was dying. Marcus studied her face. That is not what I asked. The words echoed something Ethan might have said. Aaliyah turned toward the monitor. Ethan was now watching the same footage from a tablet held by a nurse. His eyes followed every second. Why did you come back? Marcus asked. Aaliyah thought of Evelyn, her mother, the cardboard box of notebooks beneath a bed in Georgia. She thought of all the years she had spent believing silence was safer than being wrong. Because a life does not become less valuable just because everyone in the room has already given up. Marcus said nothing. On the monitor, Ethan's hand moved. He paused the recording. His eyes remained fixed on the frozen image of Aaliyah standing beside his bed. Marcus's phone rang. He answered. Yes. Silence. I understand. He ended the call. He wants to see you. Aaliyah looked down at her uniform. A faint water stain marked one knee. Her sleeves were rolled unevenly. I should change, he said now. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor lasted less than 30 seconds, but Aaliyah felt every one. When the doors opened, the hallway was silent. Men in dark suits stood along the walls. Physicians gathered near the medical suite. Nobody laughed when Aaliyah passed. Dr. Hale stood near the door. His eyes met hers, then moved away. Inside, Ethan Kong rested against raised pillows. He looked smaller than the man Aaliyah had seen crossing the estate for 11 months, but his eyes were different. Awake, focused, controlled. Aaliyah stopped 6 feet from the bed. Mr. Kong. Ethan studied her. The silence stretched until she wondered whether he had the strength to speak. Marcus says you saved my life. His voice was rough. Aaliyah shook her head. I noticed a pattern. The doctors noticed numbers. They were trying to help you. Ethan's gaze shifted briefly toward Dr. Hale beyond the glass door. And you? Aaliyah looked at her hands. I was trying not to watch someone die again. Something changed in Ethan's face. Not pity. Recognition. He reached toward the tablet beside him and replayed the security footage. The image froze again on Aaliyah, standing in front of the medication tray. You knew they could remove you from this house. Yes. You knew Marcus did not trust you. Marcus looked away. Yes. Ethan's eyes returned to hers. Why? Aaliyah breathed slowly. Because you were still a person before you were a patient, Mr. Kong. Ethan stared at her. The room seemed to narrow around those words. Then he looked at Marcus. Why did she come back? Marcus answered quietly. She said a life does not become less valuable because the room has already given up. Ethan watched Aaliyah for several seconds. His expression remained controlled, but his eyes softened almost imperceptibly. He looked toward the glass wall, where Dr. Hale and the medical team waited. "Bring everyone downstairs tomorrow morning." Marcus nodded. "Everyone." Ethan's gaze stayed on Aaliyah's Black Maid's uniform. Everyone who watched her speak and decided her uniform mattered more than her words. Dr. Hale stopped moving beyond the glass. Ethan saw him. "And Marcus?" "Yes, sir." Ethan's voice became quieter. "Find every record connected to Evelyn Carter." Aaliyah lifted her head. Ethan leaned back against the pillow, exhausted but awake. "I want to know who taught this housekeeper to see what my doctors refused to see." By 9 the next morning, the rain had stopped, but the Kong estate felt colder than it had during the storm. Sunlight poured through the 30-foot windows of the grand hall and spread across polished marble, catching on dark suits, white coats, and faces that had not slept. Dr. Hale stood beside the 3 specialists. The nurse waited near the staircase. Marcus held a thin folder against his chest. Aaliyah stood alone near the back wall in the same Black Maid's uniform she wore every morning. She had considered calling in sick. She had considered leaving Chicago before sunrise. Instead, she arrived at 6:30, tied back her hair, and finished cleaning the east hallway because routine was the only thing keeping her hands steady. At 9:12, the elevator doors opened. Ethan Kong stepped out. Marcus moved instinctively toward him, but Ethan lifted one hand. He walked without assistance. Slowly, carefully. Each step seemed to cost him something, yet no one dared suggest he sit down. The room watched the Korean man they had prepared to mourn less than 12 hours earlier cross the marble floor under his own strength. Ethan stopped in the center of the hall. His eyes moved over the doctors, then the staff, then Aaliyah. "Marcus." Marcus opened the folder. Evelyn Carter worked at St. Matthew's Hospital for 23 years. Nursing aide. Excellent employment record until her final year. Dr. Hale's shoulders stiffened. Marcus continued. She filed repeated internal reports concerning adverse reactions connected to a treatment protocol used on vulnerable patients. Her observations described muscle tension, altered swallowing, cold skin, perspiration, and respiratory changes. Aaliyah felt the room tilt. The same pattern. The same 7 seconds. "What happened to the reports?" Ethan asked. Marcus looked at Dr. Hale. They were dismissed. Ethan's face revealed nothing. "By whom?" Hale cleared his throat. "Mr. Kong, medical decisions from nearly 2 decades ago cannot be evaluated through incomplete administrative records." Ethan turned his head. "I asked Marcus." Hale fell silent. "Several physicians signed the review," Marcus said. Dr. Victor Hale was one of them. The grand hall became so quiet that Aaliyah heard the old clock near the library doorway. One tick. Another. Ethan looked at Hale. "You remembered Evelyn Carter last night." It was not a question. Hale adjusted his cuffs. "I remembered a difficult employee." Aaliyah lowered her eyes. Ethan saw it. "Difficult," he repeated. "She challenged physicians without qualifications." Was she wrong? Hale hesitated. That hesitation changed the room. Ethan took one slow step toward him. Was she wrong? Her conclusions were never formally proven. Ethan looked toward Marcus. That is not an answer. Marcus opened another page. After Evelyn's reports were dismissed, the hospital quietly revised portions of the treatment protocol 14 months later. Hale's face went still. Aaliyah closed her eyes. 14 months. Her grandmother had lost her job, carrying a warning the hospital later used without ever restoring her name. Ethan turned toward Aaliyah. "Miss Carter." She looked up. "What do you want?" The question frightened her more than Dr. Hale ever had. Around her stood people who assumed money would be the answer. A position, a house, a check large enough to turn pain into a transaction. Aaliyah thought of Evelyn writing in those notebooks beneath a yellow kitchen lamp. She thought of her mother. She thought of 10 years spent hiding from her own ability to notice. "Clear my grandmother's name," she said. Ethan did not move. "That is all. She died believing nobody listened." Aaliyah's voice trembled once. "I want the record to say she spoke. I want it to say she was worth hearing." Ethan froze mid-breath. Marcus lowered the folder. The nurse wiped at her eyes. Dr. Hale looked toward the floor. Ethan studied Aaliyah's uniform, the plain black fabric that had told everyone in the medical suite exactly how much attention they thought her words deserved. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Who told her she was only a maid? No one answered. Ethan looked from one face to another. Who decided a uniform could make an observation invisible? The doctors remained silent. Marcus, send the Carter records to independent medical review and the appropriate professional authorities. Every page. No private settlement. No buried file. Yes, sir. Ethan turned to Hale. You will no longer serve on my medical team. Hale opened his mouth. Ethan raised one hand. The doctor stopped. No shouting. No threat. Just a door closing quietly on years of certainty. Then Ethan faced Aaliyah again. Evelyn Carter will be heard. Aaliyah's eyes filled, but she held his gaze. For the first time in 10 years, the shame she had carried did not feel like her own. The room went silent. 3 months later, morning sunlight warmed a red brick building on the south side of Chicago, where a new brass sign caught the light above a wide glass entrance. Evelyn Carter Community Care Center. Aaliyah stood across the street for nearly 5 minutes before she could make herself walk closer. Cars passed behind her. A city bus sighed at the corner. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet Aaliyah could barely breathe. The independent review had taken weeks. Old records were opened. Former staff members were interviewed. Evelyn's reports were compared with later hospital protocol changes, and for the first time, her observations were formally acknowledged as concerns that should have received serious review. The hospital issued a public correction to her employment record. Her name was cleared. Aaliyah read the letter 12 times. Then she placed it inside Evelyn's oldest notebook and cried until morning. Ethan kept his promise. He also did something Aaliyah never requested. The center opened with licensed physicians, registered nurses, patient advocates, and a training program built around one simple principle. Listen before assumptions become conclusions. Ethan funded the building, but his name appeared nowhere on the walls. When reporters asked who paid for it, the center's director gave the same answer every time. Someone who learned to listen. Aaliyah entered through the glass doors wearing navy blue scrubs. The first week she had tried to refuse them. I am not a nurse, she reminded Ethan. Not yet, he replied. He arranged nothing she had not earned. No false title. No shortcut. Instead, Aaliyah enrolled in an accredited nursing program and worked at the center as a patient care assistant within the limits of her training. She studied at night, took exams on Saturdays, asked questions she had once been too ashamed to ask. For the first time in 10 years, learning did not feel like standing beside her mother's bed. It felt like walking toward Evelyn. Near noon, Aaliyah found an elderly woman sitting alone outside an examination room. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. A monitor nearby displayed steady numbers, but the woman kept glancing toward the exit. Aaliyah sat several feet away. You want to leave? She said gently. The woman nodded. They say everything looks fine, but you do not feel fine. The woman's eyes lifted. Aaliyah waited. No rushing. No correcting. Just listening. The woman slowly described a strange pressure that appeared only when she stood after sitting for several minutes. Aaliyah did not diagnose her. She documented the concern and brought it to the licensed nurse, who asked the physician to reassess the patient before discharge. A small thing. A careful thing. The kind of thing Evelyn had spent a lifetime doing when no one was watching. From the far end of the hallway, Ethan Kong watched in silence. He had recovered slowly. The sharp lines had returned to his face, and the dark suit fit him with the same controlled authority Aaliyah remembered from the estate. But something about him had changed. He no longer entered rooms assuming the most important voice would be the one with the highest title. Aaliyah noticed him and walked over. You were supposed to be resting. My doctor said I could walk. Your doctor also said 2 miles a day, not inspect an entire building. Ethan glanced toward the elderly woman. What happened? She needed someone to hear the part that did not fit neatly on the screen. Ethan looked at Aaliyah for a moment. Evelyn. Aaliyah smiled. Evelyn. They walked toward the entrance together. Above them, sunlight moved across the brass letters of her grandmother's name. Aaliyah stopped beneath the sign. I spent 10 years believing I failed my mother, she said. Ethan waited. Maybe I was so afraid of being wrong that I decided silence was safer. Silence nearly killed me. Aaliyah looked at him. Ethan's expression remained calm. So I am personally against it. She laughed softly. It was the first time he had heard that sound without fear hiding behind it. Ethan turned toward the busy center, where nurses crossed bright hallways and patients were greeted by name. Your grandmother was right. he said. Aaliyah followed his gaze. Machines counted numbers. People watch people. Somewhere inside, a nurse called for a physician to take a second look. No one laughed. No one asked who had the right to notice. Aaliyah placed one hand against the cool brick beneath Evelyn's name. Once, she had cleaned rooms where her voice disappeared beneath white coats and expensive titles. Now, every room in this building had been created around the lesson a forgotten black woman refused to stop teaching. Ethan stepped back, giving Aaliyah the moment without trying to own it. She looked through the glass doors at the life waiting inside and finally understood that dignity did not arrive when powerful people gave it to you. It had been there all along. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.